How likely do you think that is at this point? I mean,
very, very
really?
likely. The people want to see that fight. People will definitely buy that fight. They'll either because they're so peeved and pissed at Diaz that they want to see him get beaten down, or because they are going to accept that Diaz was totally off his game. He was feeling only 70%, and he was asleep for the first 2 rounds, only woke up 3 hours before the fight, felt terrible. It's going to be an entirely different fight, and they're hoping it's going to be an entirely different fight. They won't be disappointed. The fight is going to be very successful, and my expectation is Nick Diaz at 100%. Nick did the best of any of George's last 5 opponents in defending takedowns over the fight, and that's Nick Diaz at 70%. So Nick Diaz at 100%, George is not getting a single takedown. Okay, now you're in trouble, George, because you got beat up last time.
But Jonathan,
they're only on the feet for 7 minutes.
I understand, and I understand your side from the Nick Diaz perspective, and I get that. But is anybody ever 100% going into a fight? I mean, George St-Pierre, there's talk that he wasn't even 100% going into that fight. No one is ever 100%. The fight happened. And it was what it was. I think it's going to be a tough sell to the UFC. It's going to be a really tough sell to George St-Pierre, I think, at this point. And it's going to be an even tougher sell to Johnny Hendricks, who's just sitting there waiting for his title shot that has been granted to him.
Hendricks doesn't matter because, as Nick said at the post-fight press conference, no one wants to see that fight. No one wants to see Hendricks and George wrestle each other. And that's true. They didn't debate him on that because they know it's true. And Dana was looking at them, and he knew it was true as well, okay? So the big fight, the big fight is the fight everyone wants to see, which is the fight with George and Nick after Nick was ripped off by a commission that didn't enforce the rules, instead bent the rules in favor of the hometown guy. That's totally offside. Nick waited way too long to fight George, to have his opportunity tainted by this kind of ineptitude by the commission.
Okay,
that's just not fair.
Let me ask you about Cesar Gracie for a second, because there's been talk from MMA Junkie. They're saying that Cesar Gracie says you don't even represent Nick Diaz. What is the deal with Cesar and Nick's taxes and you and that whole thing?
I guess all I can say is if Cesar Gracie says I don't act for the Cesar Gracie fight team or the team, that's fine. I'm answerable to Nick and whatever team surrounds Nick, but everything else is just not for the public. It's private business. And in terms of the rest of Nick's private business that he was kind of talking about at the post-fight press conference, everything is in hand. Everything is in hand.
How's he
doing? No one need worry.
How's he doing?
He's doing great. He's running in a race this weekend.
Is he looking at fighting again? Because there was talk that maybe he wouldn't fight again. Is it a George St-Pierre rematch or nothing at this point? What do you think? Yeah,
at this point, he still wants a fight that he was owed and didn't get, which is a fight with George at 170 pounds. That's the fight he's looking at. And other than that, he's not interested. He took a year off with his suspension, his year vacation, and he's in no rush to. He's not going to be jumping in there with these young guys. What's the point? No, that's not smart at this point. There's no point to doing that.
Well, on the bright side, with this whole commission thing and the drug testing, Nick will probably not serve another suspension, no matter what. Even if he was smoking the day before the fight, I'm thinking he probably wouldn't serve another suspension. I mean, you heard there in the clip when I was talking to Dana White, Matthew Riddle's an interesting case because he tested positive when he fought in July in Calgary, then he fought here in November, didn't test positive, and then he fought again 3 months later and tested positive in England. So you wonder, well, what was the difference here in Montreal?
Yeah, I know. I noted the same thing when I was trying to analyze in advance before the fight what the probability was of an actual drug test. And the Riddle case did stand out because you're right. That's that's just too coincidental, considering there's never been a
right.
Yeah.
Did Nick know this? Did Nick know of any of these problems beforehand with the commission and not taper off his weed habit as he would for a fight, say, in California or Nevada?
Look, if you're a smart guy who doesn't want to test positive because it's a hassle to do that, then you're going to have a conservative plan, and you're going to stop. You're going to assume that they could test,
right.
So you're going to taper off at the appropriate time period. But you got to know, see, Quebec's threshold for testing positive for marijuana metabolites is way higher than the requirement in Nevada. Nevada's like 15 nanograms per milliliter, and Nick was at 25 nanograms per milliliter after the Condit fight. In Quebec, you've got to be 50 nanograms per milliliter. So if the Condit fight for Nick had been in Quebec, that would have been fine, even if they had tested it and applied Quebec's rule. It's odd they have such a high threshold in Quebec. It's good, obviously.
Yeah, it is odd, but I've seen guys fight and then smoke a joint in the parking lot at intermission in MMA here. So I've seen some things in this province. Jonathan Tweedale, I appreciate you joining us. Good luck in your fight. I think definitely people are going to continue to watch it and see what happens. It's an interesting story, and our best to Nick and the whole crew.
Thanks a lot. Pleasure talking to you tonight.